Don't move!
I love you.
I know.
Hands up! Stand up!
You know, I've loved Star Wars ever since the first time I watched a TV airing of Return of the Jedi, which my dad had recorded on VHS when I was about 5 years old. It was the only Star Wars movie we owned. Well, I mean, I guess technically we didn't actually own it, but you get what I mean. Even though I really had no idea who Luke, Leia, and Han were, or why one of them was frozen in some kind of metal, I instantly fell in love with them. Begged my mother to rent Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back. The twist in that movie, by the way, is a lot less impactful when you start with Return of the Jedi. And from that time on, I was enthralled with the films. This happened to be around 1994, on the eve of Star Wars' return to pop culture relevance. Not that the trilogy had been forgotten per se, it had been released on VHS in the 80s, as well as Laserdisc in 1993. In case you don't know what those are, it's like a DVD, but comically big. And series creator George Lucas had partnered with Disney Imagineering to take people on a wild ride through a galaxy far, far away on Star Tours. But it was no longer the omnipresent pop culture force it was in the late 70s and early 80s. That all started to change in 1995 as Kenner released a new line of action figures.
Star Wars Power of the Force Collection. Darth Vader leads an evil empire towards universal domination. Join a brave rebellion with Luke Skywalker, Han Solo and Chewbacca, and Jedi Obi-Wan Kenobi. Can you stop the Empire? Star Wars Power of the Force Collection from
Much like most of the mostly targeted at boys action figures at the time, the original Power of the Force figures were ripped AF. I made my poor mother drop an exorbitant amount of money on countless figures, a speeder bike, and the creme de la creme of my Star Wars collection, Luke's X-Wing. But Kenner's Power of the Force line wasn't the only major player in Star Wars at the time. There's also Micro Machines.
To space with Star Wars!
May the Force be with you!
Star Wars Micro Machines! There's a cool adventure in every collection! Micro Machines Star Wars collections and vehicle collections, each sold separately.
Good lord, did I love my Micro Machines. Creating massive space battles was made so simple with these little hunks of plastic. You could even pit a Star Destroyer against the USS Enterprise, thanks to the fact that Micro Machines was also producing Star Trek models at the time. I never did this, however. My little logic-driven mind just couldn't create a scenario in which ships from both a distant past and doubly distant galaxy would meet vessels from the 23rd and 24th century Milky Way galaxy. If the tiny Micro Machines weren't your thing, Micro Machines' action fleet had you covered. With all the different types of toys on offer, it's little wonder that during the mid-90s, the Star Wars presence in toy stores gradually grew until it was not uncommon to see entire aisles dedicated to the merchandise. Kinda like today. The revival of Star Wars toys also happened to coincide with a sort of golden age of Star Wars video games. LucasArts, formerly Lucasfilm Games, had been creating games for other Lucasfilm franchises, but had not had the rights to Star Wars until the early 90s. As soon as they had obtained the rights, they set out creating incredible games based on the franchise. The first Star Wars-based game, developed wholly in-house at LucasArts, was X-Wing for personal computers. The spaceflight simulator put players in the cockpit of an X-Wing and allowed them to take on the Empire. The game, as well as its sequel, TIE Fighter, were widely praised, and were really the first games that truly managed to fully capture the feel of the films. Okay, I know it doesn't look like much right now, but back in 1993 and 1994, these graphics were plenty to immerse a player. The 90s would see LucasArts release other classics for the PC, like Dark Forces, which would evolve into the Jedi Knight series. Over on the consoles, Sculptured Software gave gamers the superlative Super Star Wars games on the SNES. While these games had a near cruel and unusual level of difficulty, they were still fun as hell, and I can't tell you how many times I made my mom rent Super Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back, mainly because it allowed me to play what was, at the time, the greatest recreation of the Battle of Hoth. Of course, the 16-bit version of the famous battle would be absolutely eclipsed in 1996, by a game which would cause me to take my first steps into a larger world.
When Luke Skywalker was most vulnerable.
This is a dangerous time for you. It is you and your abilities the Emperor wants.
When a renegade hero became a friend in desperate need. And a dark villain faced his greatest challenge.
Join me, and together
we can rule the galaxy as father and son.
When the Empire turned more and more to the forces of the underworld.
Bounty hunters. We don't need that scum.
The underworld moved in to crush the Empire and the Rebellion in a single stroke. After The Empire Strikes Back and before Return of the Jedi, there was a time when heroes and villains alike lived in the shadows of the Empire.
Released for both PC and the Nintendo 64, Shadows of the Empire came out of the gate swinging, with an incredible level recreating the Battle of Hoth. Again, it doesn't look like much today, but holy crap was it mind-blowing in 1996. The game was part of a multi-pronged attack by Lucasfilm to test the feasibility of merchandising a theatrical Star Wars motion picture release, without actually having to release any actual movie. Along with the game, there was an excellent novel written by Steve Perry, which I recommend all Star Wars fans read, comics, and a soundtrack release on compact disc, and of course toys. A whole bantha load of toys. While I enjoyed the game and toys, what stuck with me the most from Shadows of the Empire was this idea that there were more stories to be told from the Star Wars universe. There were no prequels, there were no sequels, no anthology films, and I was just a little too young to read the expanded universe novels. By the way, I would read them when I got older. There are so many things I had to say about the incredible Heir to the Empire saga, but that's gonna have to wait for another video. This meant I could fill in the blanks left by the films with my own imagination. I can still remember recesses where all I did with my friends was talk about what we thought happened after Return of the Jedi, and ruminating on what exactly was going to happen in the prequels. This of course was all punctuated by bouts of Zelda 64 speculation, naturally. I think the best part of being a fan of Star Wars in the 90s was the absolute abundance of possibility. We knew Episode 1 was on its way, but in the meantime, our imaginations were free to fill in all the blanks in whichever way we saw fit.
The Star Wars Trilogy on video. Now, the Star Wars Trilogy on video in THX.
Chewie, get us out of here!
Feel the full force in THX. It's a difference you can see and hear.
We're not actually going into an asteroid field.
It'd be crazy to follow us, wouldn't they?
By the legend that rules the galaxy.
It is your destiny.
The original version of Star Wars on video. Buy it before it's gone forever.
Well, that sounded a bit ominous, didn't it? What could they mean by being able to own the trilogy one last time? We found out in 1997 when Lucasfilm gave limited theatrical runs to each entry in the original trilogy, each one featuring new scenes and special effects that had not been possible when the originals were made. I was outraged. Absolutely outraged. How could George defile his magnum opus? I absolutely boycotted those films on principle. Just kidding, I was effing stoked. For the first time, I got to see the original trilogy in theaters, and it was so exciting to try to spot the new scenes and added effects. At the time, I had no problems with the special editions. Well, except this. Why does he sound like Palpatine? I wouldn't start to resent the special editions until years later, when the trilogy was first released on DVD. By then, the CGI had aged poorly, and Hayden Christensen being added at the end of Episode 6 just felt wrong to me. Suffice it to say, at the time, the special editions seemed incredible, and they were so effective in getting me excited for the release of Episode 1.
A long, long time ago, in a galaxy far away, Naboo was under an attack.
In November of 1998, we finally got to see our first glimpse of the movie, attached to screenings of The Waterboy, Meet Joe Black, and The Siege. The 2-minute trailer for The Phantom Menace drove Star Wars fans, and I'm pretty sure theater employees, absolutely nuts. People were paying full price for movies, only to leave the theater after the trailer played. Remember, there was no YouTube, and for many people, if they wanted to watch the trailer, that meant tying up their phone line for who knows how long, while the trailer slowly downloaded to their computer, only for it to look and sound like this when it was played. The amount of hype this trailer caused was monumental, and though I was a little disappointed Anakin was going to be a kid, I still couldn't wait to see this film. Theaters, by and large, didn't offer purchasing tickets online back then, which meant you had to wait in line the day the tickets went on sale, and since there was no reserved seating, you had to wait in line on opening day for hours just to get a decent seat. I'm not gonna lie, I'm glad that that's different now, but there is a part of me that misses that feeling of
anticipation.
The movie was, well, I didn't quite know how to feel. I was still a kid, and I had invested a lot of my hopes and dreams in this movie. In fact, Phantom Menace is the prequel I have the fondest feelings toward, because it was the only one which came out at a time when I was young enough to look past poor dialogue.
Are you an angel? What?
Juvenile humor. And wooden direction.
Anakin Skywalker, meet Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Hi. You're a Jedi too? Pleased to meet you.
There were plenty of toys too. Now your action figures could actually talk through the power of Comtech technology. So you could hear,
I'll try spinning, that's a good trick!
To your heart's content, I guess. As cool as the action figures and ships were, there was one thing that every kid on my block wanted. Darth Maul's kick-ass double-bladed lightsaber. When the movie was set to release on VHS, I begged my mom to purchase it for us. You know what's funny, as I look back on my memories watching Star Wars on home video, I've noticed an odd trend. Whenever I popped in episode 4, 5, and 6, I usually watched the entire film. Whenever I popped in my copy of Phantom Menace, I almost always fast-forwarded to the pod race, and then the final lightsaber battle. The rest of the film just didn't grab me. You know, being a 90s kid born in the late 80s puts me in something of a weird position when it comes to Star Wars. See, I was a kid when Episode 1 came out, but I was a teen when Episode 2 and 3 came out. Probably explains why I still have such a nostalgic fondness for the original trilogy, and even Episode 1, while having no such love for Episodes 2 and 3. And when it comes to the new trilogy, well, I've got some mixed feelings. The Force Awakens was a fine movie, but I was a little bit sad that it looked like they were going to be playing it safe and redoing, essentially, the old trilogy, beat for beat. And then The Last Jedi came out, and it was like they did a 180 and decided, you know what, we're gonna subvert all of your expectations and go in a completely different direction. And while I would have preferred that approach from the beginning, the problem is they started down one path and then they did a 180, and now with the trailer for episode 9 that has dropped, it looks like they're doing a 180 back again. That's my problem with the new trilogy. It seems as if Lucasfilm is paying way too much attention to what fans are saying on the internet and trying to give them what they want, without having a sort of solidified artistic direction. That being said, my kids are probably going to grow up looking up to Poe Dameron, Finn, and Rey in the same way that I looked up to Luke, Leia, and Han. And in the same way that my little brother looked up to Anakin, Obi-Wan, and I don't know, Qui-Gon, I guess? Look, at the end of the day, I've never felt the need to say George Lucas ruined my childhood with the prequels, or Kathleen Kennedy is ruining my childhood, or anybody who's touched the franchise. Because the fact of the matter is, nothing that George Lucas can do, Kathleen Kennedy, Rian Johnson, J.J. Abrams, nothing they can do can go back and erase my fond memories of Star Wars.